Continuing on with the Clone Wars, I hopped on over to part 2 of the Ahsoka Learns Political Unrest on Mandalore arc. Season 3, Episode 5, Corruption, Season 3, Episode 6, The Academy, and Season 3, Episode 7, Assassin. Let's jump in. Corruption. So there's a big economic crisis on Mandalore because of the war. No supplies are coming in. We find out that there's some corruption going on with the importing of a diluting agent meant to dilute tea. A smuggler says that if they dilute the tea, they can make twice as much tea and twice as much profit. But then the customs agent says, "Isn't that toxic?" And the smuggler replies, "Only if the dosage is wrong." So he tells him to get it right. There's an interesting moment between the Duchess and Padme in this episode, discussing politics, discussing the war between the Republic and the Separatists. Padme has her doubts about the war. Her sources say that it's going bad, but the Chancellor says everything is fine and dandy. A lot of the political talk in the Clone Wars episodes and even the prequels kind of hold up a mirror to the real world. Senators serving their own interests, greed, organizations, corporations, corruption in the ranks, helping themselves rather than helping the people who they serve. The next day, Padme and the Duchess go to a new hospital, and when they get there, they find a bunch of sick children in the hospital who have been poisoned. Apparently, this isn't an isolated incident. Other regions are experiencing the same thing. The Duchess gets her personal bodyguards to investigate because they're really the only people that she can trust. Padme and the Duchess go to the school where the sick kids came from. The food is fine, the water is fine. But what about that bottled drink they're drinking? Well, that isn't provided by the school, we find out. It's brought in from an outside vendor. Interesting. You know, this reminds me of, and it's completely different, I know, but when I was in high school, back in like 2001, I remember when they first put in vending machines around the school. There was a vending machine at every corner of the school and in the cafeteria, and it was weird to me. It was obvious that the soda companies struck a deal with either the state or local education officials. I never thought it was a nefarious or evil thing, anything like that. I always thought it was just strange. It was basically like having a big advertisement for a sugar factory in a public school. It's interesting. Anyway, the Duchess and Padme find out that the tea is what was poisoning the kids. They go and check the import log to see who brought the tainted tea, but there's no record of anyone bringing anything in. Someone is skirting the system. The superintendent starts to run away, which, okay, in the middle of a conversation, you just turn and run away. It's pretty obvious that you know something, right? So long story short, after a blaster battle with the smugglers, the Duchess and Padme find out who is smuggling in the diluted agent. They witness bribery, and the Duchess says my favorite line in this episode: "The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy is money." The episode is about continuously passing the blame for a problem. It's about the lack of oversight and corruption, tight budgets, bribery, the need for balance in both the private and public sectors, desperate times and turning towards the black market when all else fails. It wasn't necessarily evil that got all of the children sick. It wasn't a terrorist organization, but it was negligence, a lack of oversight, corruption in the ranks, greed, short-term thinking. In a moment of anger, the Duchess burns the building down where they found the diluting agent. Instead of collecting evidence and learning more about what happened, she decides to torch it. I wonder if she's involved. Ooh. After watching Corruption, I hopped on over to the Academy. So Anakin and Ahsoka come to Mandalore to help out at the Duchess's request, but Anakin says he has to leave immediately, which leaves Ahsoka there to instruct new cadets on Mandalore by herself. She teaches them about corruption, leaders looking out for their own pockets rather than the people that they're supposed to be serving. She teaches them about greed, about revolution. I love what Ahsoka says in the classroom. The deadliest enemies of a society dwell within its borders. That line of dialogue reminds me of the Oath of Enlistment here in the United States. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And domestic. And domestic. Possibly the most important line in the oath. And domestic. You serve the Constitution. You serve to protect that Constitution. This classroom scene is great. It's interesting and informative. You challenge leaders. Expose corruption. Change comes from within, Ahsoka says. It was neat. I loved it. That night, 4 of the cadets sneak to a warehouse to check out the rationed food supply. They stumble upon a meeting with off-worlders and unmarked police officers. But they get found out, they get chased, but they ultimately escape. The next morning, the 4 cadets go and talk to the Duchess, who is actually one of the students' aunts. The cadets tell the Duchess that there's no food shortage, actually. There's a ton of food in one of the ports, just sitting there. But the Duchess plays it cool, acts like nothing's wrong. This frustrates the cadets. It's interesting, and at this point, I'm a little suspicious of her. Long story short, Ahsoka finds out what the cadets did in their plan to meet with the Prime Minister later that night. And eventually they do go and meet with the Prime Minister. They get attacked by some guards, but Ahsoka saves them. She analyzes the hologram that the kids recorded, and it turns out that the shadowy figure they saw the other night was actually the Prime Minister. Ooh, I really like what happens next. Ahsoka plays the game. She plays dumb. She's tricking the Prime Minister into admitting guilt, so it seems. The cadets walk into the room in custody, and then Ahsoka tells the Prime Minister that her students are involved in a conspiracy against the government. So far, I like this episode more than the previous one. While I like the overall plot of the corruption episode, this episode is more exciting, it's more fun. It's a fun mystery, kind of whodunit kind of episode. There are plans that we follow. We have students rising up to face corruption. Ahsoka putting a plan into place. It's a really fun episode. They take the cadets to prison. Ahsoka goes to prison saying she needs to interrogate them. The guards just let her in. She tells the cadets to be ready when she gives them the signal. And it turns out the Duchess is actually a prisoner. The Prime Minister captured her. So Ahsoka goes and sees her, but it's a trap. And Ahsoka is taken into custody. Ultimately, everybody gets into a scuffle. The Prime Minister is defeated, found out, captured, and imprisoned. I really like this episode. You know those movies or TV shows you watch as a kid where there's a group of friends who have to figure something out? Hell, think about The Goonies or even Stranger Things for a kind of a modern context. That's what this episode reminded me of. I really like those kind of things when a young group of friends have to take down corruption or a big institution. It's always fun. After watching The Academy, I hopped on over to Assassin. Ahsoka is ordered to stay put while the Jedi head out on some excitement. She starts having premonitions, visions in her dreams. A woman grabs her by the neck in her dream and says she will die and there's nothing you can do. She's seeing the bounty hunter Aurra Sing. Ahsoka talks to Yoda about the dream she's having, and he tells her to meditate. She needs more experience, she needs to study. And Ahsoka keeps having these visions. Visions this clear have kind of always felt a little silly to me. I understand subtle feelings, things like when Obi-Wan says he felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were subtly silenced. There's something subtle in the mystery of that, you know? But just flat out seeing exactly what is going to happen, it's just having a time machine in your brain, it doesn't do much for me. So Ahsoka figures out that Padme is in danger. She goes to talk to her. Padme continues her plan to go to Alderaan for a refugee conference, I think. Ahsoka keeps having these visions. I like what Yoda said in this episode, and it's nothing new from Yoda, but I like it. Always in motion is the future, and many possible futures there are. So maybe Ahsoka's vision will turn out to be bunk. Who knows? But Padme agrees to allow Ahsoka to tag along with her on her trip, and she continues to have these visions and false alarms along the way. So the meeting happens, the meeting that Ahsoka saw in her vision, the meeting where she saw the assassination attempt on Padme, and as she begins to speak, we see the bounty hunter Aurra Sing in a window on the second floor. Ahsoka gets a feeling, runs up to confront the bounty hunter, nudges her with the Force at the last second, which sends the laser slightly off course, which saves Padme. It was kind of funny to me. Ahsoka took all of this time to run from her position up the flight of stairs and spent all this time running towards the assassin when she could have just kicked over Padme, got her out of the line of fire. I mean, there was a lot of time that assassin could have just sniped Padme. Oh well, it's a TV show. Despite this attempt, Padme wants to go to her next meeting and give her next speech. She says that if someone wants her dead, they'll follow her wherever she goes. So at this meeting, they get a robot in a cloak to walk into the room, little trickery, and Padme talks through the robot from the safety of a different room. But the assassin is wise to the plan and ends up going to the room where Padme actually is. Ahsoka sees this unfolding and ultimately runs to the rescue. I like the plans that were in place, I like the bait and switch, and I like the fact that it actually didn't work as intended. I like the relationship between Padme and Ahsoka, exploring that a little more. Overall, this episode was fun, but for whatever reason, and it's completely my own problem, I get it. The idea of visions being so crystal clear, just seeing what's gonna happen, reminds me of the detective in the new Murder on the Orient Express movie that me and my wife watched recently. Oh neat, you can just see what's gonna happen. Oh neat, you're such an insanely smart detective that you just know. How fun for the audience. It's so fun. You want to talk about a Gary Stu or a Mary Stu? The detective from the 2017 Murder on the Orient Express fits whatever definition you choose for those terms. I went off track there. But yeah, I like these 3 episodes. This one, the assassin one, was my least favorite. My favorite was the middle one, the Academy. But I'm excited to see where this all leads. On to the next 3 episodes. Hello, Greedo. Out.